All right, we should be live now. So welcome everybody to ROC Detroit's second Google Hangout on air. Just for your reference, we are broadcasting live today. So please forgive us for any technical difficulties or anything like that. We're still working out the technology. My name is Daniel. I work with the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development, and I've been working on this ROC Detroit project since mid last year. Joined today by two colleagues and good friends who have also been very, very involved with this project. We have Dana Cooper from Fairmount Santrol and John Bradburn from General Motors. John is joining us by phone today, so you won't see his video, but you should see Dana's video down in the bottom right corner. For those that are new to ROC Detroit, which is short for Reuse Opportunity Collaboratory, this is a new initiative to bring together Detroit industries, academic institutions, and other institutions, local government, small and medium-sized businesses, entrepreneurs, the maker community, all sorts of folks interested in creating closed-loop systems where one company's waste can become another company's raw material. The topic today that we're going to be discussing and looking at is landfill-free, and why the movement towards zero waste businesses and zero waste facilities in those businesses is imperative. John and Dana represent companies and they're leaders in their companies helping to drive towards landfill-free facilities. Today they're going to be sharing some best practices, some successes that they've had within their companies while working towards landfill-free. And then they're going to talk a little bit about how community initiatives like ROC Detroit can help your business move towards landfill-free while also having a nice community impact at the same time. So with that all being said, I'm going to pass things over to John Bradburn. John, if you can just give a quick introduction to who you are, and then take it from there. I've got some slides as well that we'll be showing from John, and if you have any questions, you should see the option for a Q&A application, so you can click that Q&A app and send us questions, and you should be able to get to those questions at the end of the broadcast. So without further introduction, John, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, Daniel, thank you very much. And hopefully the slides that you flipped for us, Daniel, will correlate to what I'm saying. Basically, I'm going to go through some philosophy. I'm going to go through some reasoning. I'm going to give some detail as to why what we do with ROC Detroit and General Motors in byproduct synergies, waste minimization is so very important to our local communities as well as the world. So, Daniel, if you would, go to the next slide. I'd like to show everybody what I do for a living. And me hug a tree, I hope. And in that case, that is what I do. It's done so in a way with modern techniques, and I'm going to go through some details, and that's why ROC Detroit is so important. Daniel, if you would, go to the next slide, please. But if you question me, look towards our CEO, Mary Vera, wonderful CEO who believes very much in what we do, and sustainability is part of our core fabric. It's imperative that we do these sort of things within our communities which we operate and beyond. So let's go to the next slide, Daniel. And now I'd like you to imagine our world without flood, hurricanes, tsunamis, tornadoes, terrorism, poverty and disease and hunger. those are really our greatest challenges to sustainability. Sometimes when I ask people outside, what is the greatest challenge? I hear waste, I hear water, I hear air pollution and water pollution, that sort of thing. But really, it's these sort of things that also create what I call global turbulence. How do we manage the world and our resources in the best possible way, keeping them in their use phase? And part of the answer there is through byproduct synergies. Okay, Daniel, if you would go to the next slide. So with that, can you imagine the day we realize how the increased disasters, the negative human conditions around the globe today are deterring sustainable solutions, when at the same time it's these solutions that can improve many of these conditions. So when we do things like manage resources in the best possible way, we keep them in their use phase for others to use them as well. Very, very important in our world that's continually changing. Okay, next slide, please. I'm showing you GM's 2020 manufacturing commitments. These are our sustainability goals, and they relate to various media, but they all point to how do we manage things in the most efficient way. And in particular, as it relates to ROC Detroit, we're talking about landfill free. We're talking about total waste. Okay, next slide, please. Can you imagine the day all wastes are viewed as resources? It will be a day of byproduct synergies. It'll be a way to manage what you're seeing on the screen, all the various materials that are in a landfill, and put them to use. And I'll give some examples later. Okay, next slide, Daniel. This is our landfill-free footprint, which shows how we've got a global footprint in landfill-free by country. It's really a common, consistent way of doing it. We have a best practice that we can share. We have a blueprint for becoming landfill-free. That blueprint gives detail, and it's available to all, to anybody who wants to aspire to do this sort of thing. It also will help your company operate in the best possible way, and it's applicable for manufacturing operations, non-manufacturing operations, office spaces, yeah, even households. Okay, next step, please. The summary of it all really is there are 9 steps that we have put together within our blueprint, and this slide indicates them, and trying to understand what you have by way of a data system and defining it, prioritizing it, and so on. 9 steps to get there, and that also allows for continual improvement. But really, I like to think there's a 10th step. A 10th step that I call it building enthusiasm. Why people do what they do. They do it because they're enthused about things, and this is a perfect subject. What better way to get enthused about something than to protect our resources for our future generations? Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to get into some examples, and here's one. This was a special project that we did with a byproduct in Detroit. It's a project that's near and dear to us because we're helping those in need with some material of ours where we took scrap vehicle components, insulation, sound deadening type materials, and converted it, processed it into fabric, of which we made available to a wonderful program in Detroit called the Empowerment Plan. You're seeing Veronica Scott on the screen. When you get a chance, please look her up. She's got a wonderful project in Detroit, and we continue to work with her. And we feel honored to do so, by the way. Next slide, please. Can you imagine a company using their outputs as their inputs? And here's 3 examples. Our Buick Verano built in Michigan. The plant is taking their packaging cardboard boxes from parts, sending it to a company that processes it called Federal Mogul. You may recognize that company. They in turn make a vehicle component, which is a headliner for the Buick Verano. We do that with the Buick LaCrosse as well. Below that, you're seeing protective aids, caps, plugs from our Fort Wayne assembly plant in Indiana. They send them to a recycler, a company called GDC Inc., who makes baffles and shrouds and that sort of thing for our vehicles, air deflectors in the truck in particular. That's a closed loop scenario. It's upcycling. It's taking things such as our tires, our test tires out of our Milford Proving Grounds and making those into baffles as well. So 3 examples there of upcycling, taking materials and making new parts from them, and keeping those resources, those natural resources in their use phase. Next slide, please. What you're seeing here is a cover, translucent picture of our Chevy Volt battery. It's a 6-foot-long apparatus, a wonderfully engineered piece, about 460 pounds. The cover itself was a challenge. The question became, what can you do with it? Because it was a thermoset material, plastic that's very difficult to traditionally recycle. And Daniel would flip to the next slide. I will show those who are online what we've done with it. So you're hopefully seeing a wildlife connection to what we do. It also fits in our sustainability goals for having certified wildlife habitats at all of our operations. Top left is a hen wood duck. She's nesting in there and into that particular Chevy Volt box. This is actually part of the battery, not the container. Next to that is a Ducks Unlimited event. This young man holding the box made that box at the event itself. Lower left is an eastern screech owl. The owls love these boxes too, and if you'll notice below the owl, you'll see some scratch marks onto the box, and that's from their claws getting into the box. I took that picture about 2 weeks ago. And then lower right is some wood duck nest eggs in a Chevy Volt box. Okay, Daniel, next slide, please. These are all examples of things that can be done to enhance a landfill-free program beyond and above traditional recycling. Traditional recycling is your baseline. Once you get that done, the next thing to do is to find special projects to continually improve, do better. And of course, elimination of waste is the ideal scenario. You're seeing some young ladies here at a local middle school who are making a bat house from shipping containers out of Europe. They will then take that and put it into a Chevy Volt cover, and that'll protect that wood for many, many years and serve the bats in our areas that we have these boxes. We have over 600 of these boxes spread out around North America today and doing conservation efforts of these sorts. Next slide, please. Another waste minimization example, another Chevy Volt section with a black-capped chickadee feeding her young. Next slide, please. What you're seeing is an empty parking lot. If you drove through Detroit, you'd probably see quite a few of these, or any city, really. And in this particular case, this is in South Detroit. It's a former parking lot of which we felt had great potential. So the question became, what could we do with this parking lot to improve people's health and the environment? When we do a sustainability project, when we do a landfill-free project, we try to tie it to many sustainability impacts, such as community outreach, wildlife habitat, VOCs, air, water issues, waste reduction, of course. So, next slide, please. We combined this particular need for working in that parking lot with another issue, and that's due to international trade. We received a lot of containers. These containers were steel. They're from Korea and bringing parts into one of our plants. The question became, do we send them to a foundry and have them melted? Or do we do what's on the next slide? Daniel, please, next slide. We placed one on the parking lot, felt that that was good. So we thought we could do more of this. Next slide, Daniel. We added this. We added some compost made from Detroit, a company called Detroit Dirt, another wonderful project, and company in Detroit. They take scraps from our Renaissance Center in Detroit, combine that with manure from the Detroit Zoo, herbivore, and age it, process it, and lo and behold, add humus, and a wonderful, wonderful compost is made. These are a local family coming in to help us do what's shown on the next slide. Daniel, please. It's turned into what's called the Cadillac Urban Garden. We've got many more gardens in Detroit now made from these steel shipping containers that grow wonderful food. The community comes in, works these gardens, and are able to harvest fruits, vegetables from the garden itself. Okay, Daniel, next slide, please. Just a quick example of seeing things not as they are, but what they can become. It's kind of a motto maybe to live one's life with, and the possibilities are endless. And in this case, you're seeing these shingles and these shakes on the side of this cabin, and they're actually used pallets. They're scrap pallets, the thin ones, in fact. Next slide, please. We look forward to the day that resources continue in their use phase, and we try to take byproducts and make as much revenue as possible when we do generate them. If we generate them, there's a lot of value in these things, in these materials, especially the metals, but there's value in all. If you have enough of it, you can work with it. And if you become creative enough, you can realize great gain in many ways, not just necessarily financial, but in many cases, it can be a great financial reward as well. Next slide, please. However, the goal for all companies should be to set that goal to be zero revenue and have zero costs from all byproducts. That's a stretch goal. But what that means is if you've done that, you've been 100% efficient, you've consumed your materials within your processes. That's the ideal scenario. Next slide, please. I call this one that man brought together can be separated. And in this case, this is a stream that was very, very challenging. We found a way, though, introducing technologies to enable the plant, our plant in Rochester, New York, to become landfill-free by way of centrifuging these materials and separating the liquids from the solids and taking those liquids and recovering the oils, pulling the water out, feeding it back into the machine, and saving a considerable amount of money. And new oil purchases about $13 a gallon. It helped fund the landfill-free program. Next slide, please. That is how we did it. This is the company, and they have a very good centrifuge program. The process separates the materials and creates value from those commodities. Next slide, please. This is one example of a demonstration how a company who is seeking landfill-free designations at many of its plants can reach out and help where needed and when knowledge exists. We had a fair amount of knowledge as it relates to polymer science, as it relates to oil management and those sort of things. So when the Gulf spill occurred, we swung into action because we felt it was important to help. To lend a hand, we put a team together of engineers and companies, a small one, very, very small one, and it included the company I showed before who had the centrifuge. We recovered 227 miles of the used boom from the Gulf of Mexico and converted it into vehicle components. And the next slide, Daniel, if you would please, will show that string, how we did it, and the various companies that were involved, from recovering the material to centrifuging it, working it into vehicle components, which appeared as baffles on the 2010, 11, and 12 Chevrolet Volt. Okay, next slide, please. This is a simple example, but sometimes simple is wonderful. And in this case, this is how our Uzbekistan operation is cutting their grass to benefit cattle, to benefit livestock, and just a way of becoming, I think, a little more efficient. Simple example. Next step, next slide, rather. So the question is when is recycling material bad? Well, when it can be reused. These are our truck cutouts, window cutouts, and we did a project to have those cutouts, which created actually very, very good steel, and that then, rather than send them to a foundry to have melted and reformulated at great energy costs, we sold them to another company, non-automotive, to make brackets for the heating, venting, air conditioning industry. Next slide, please. Again, another simple example, kind of funny but true. We need to remember the basics that we've learned over the last 100 years in this country and others, and apply them. And in this case, we've got some super digesters, and we've got some composting possibilities. Next slide, and last slide, please. So with all that, we hope it's helped. We're looking forward to taking our next steps together through the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development and our ROC Detroit program, using our vision to actually see and imagine a world not as it is, but what it can become. And I think that'll do it, Daniel.
Great, thanks. Thanks so much, John. That was a always fascinating overview of what you all are doing, and you know, where the real intention behind all this lies. So now I'm going to pass this over to Dana Cooper with Fairmount Santrol, and Dana's going to talk a little bit about how they do business and where landfill free fits into all that. Go ahead, Dana.
Hi, thank you. It's so exciting to listen to John's stories and examples, and it's even more exciting to be part of some of those. And so at the very end, we will be able to tie a couple of them that we've been able to benchmark General Motors and also assist us in that. So Daniel, you have the slides?
I do, yeah, let me...
Perfect. So Fairmount Santrol is a company. We mine, manufacture, we resin coat materials for many different industries, mainly high purity silica sands and resin systems. We got involved in ROC Detroit. We purchased a facility in Detroit in 2011, and so our company has been doing all of these great things for so many years, and so I just want to highlight a little bit of our journey. And it started, our focus is on sustainable development from a manufacturing standpoint and from a mining standpoint. And we always look at our 3 Ps, so people, planet, and prosperity. And everything that we do, we have this social commitment, this environmental commitment, as well as governance. And so just want to highlight that and show our journey towards that. So next slide. So just a real quick brief, here's where we are located. So predominantly in the Midwest, but we do have facilities in other countries. But we have over 1,000 employees and different facilities you can see throughout the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Denmark. Next. So a lot of people talk about why sustainable development, and many people have different definitions of this, and we want to make sure that it's the right thing to do, as well as building our corporate culture, and it is part of every business case that we look at. And so when you look at waste reductions, or our 3R, which is, you know, reuse, recover, recycle, it's in every different thought process that we have. And so not only that, we look at many other areas that are listed here today, but really looking at highlighting all of these different areas. Next. So when as John mentioned, many things were upstream or downstream of his operations, the same as ours. And so we really have the whole value chain to identify and look for opportunities for us in this area. Next. So as Fairmount Santrol started their sustainable development journey many years ago, but formally in 2005, with a first summit where we brought over 200 employees and all stakeholders together, and really did a strategic planning 3-day session, dreaming of what the world could be. So it's kind of fitting in with what John from a philosophy standpoint, we were looking at dreaming big. And so we've had these summits every 3 years where we gain different stakeholders, including customers, suppliers, NGOs, our own family members, and we really spend an enormous amount of time looking at where we want to go and what we want to become. And we had the last one in 2014. So as this journey, as we talk about journeys to landfill free, it's also within our culture, and there's many other areas of sustainable development, and so we'd just like to highlight the one today. Next. This was our group, over 500 individuals together for 3 days. And so when you look at our 3R team, or our sustainable development team that we have, the goal is minimizing and zero waste to landfill. But in addition to that, we want to make sure we're minimizing waste to energy and then increasing composting where it's required, and our own facilities as well. Next. So as you look through this, really beginning in 2005, we had a group dream of zero waste. And so they went through many goal-setting applications. We had all of our facilities ISO 14001 from an environmental management standpoint. So we had a very good foundation and structure for being able to monitor and measure. And then each facility established a recycling team. And a lot of that was education. So we were educating all of our family members on recycling and what the importance and what different applications could come from that. And as we grow, recycling also takes a lot of innovation. So in 2009, we use as our baseline for all of our metrics. And we set a goal for 2010, a 20% reduction for the next 5 years, which would lead us to zero waste to landfill in 2015. So you can see this is a long period of time in some eyes, a 10-year commitment as far as being able to establish the necessary tracking measurements and being able to actually move through that process. The team exceeded their goals every year. But really how we were really focused initially was education, and it was more than just inside of our facilities, but how we affect our communities as well. And so we had many opportunities where community members would come in and we would host different recycling events where they could bring in things and really look at that. One that was pretty simple for most folks, we implemented print less, no more campaign. So that's simple paper recycling, which pretty much everyone would do in their household today. But it was, again, the first step in an education process. Identified other opportunities with partnerships across the value chain. So we engaged suppliers, we engaged customers, and we're really able to look at these byproduct synergy opportunities, as well as with the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development. Next. 2011, we teamed up with our Sustainable Development Best Practice team. We did treasure hunts, so we would visit our different facilities that you saw on the map, and we would identify these treasures of what we thought could be used for something else. So again, it's not just trying to reuse a cup as a cup, is how can we put innovation into this and really look at reusing different things for different applications. Also, we identified some partnerships with composting. Many of our facilities throughout the United States are in rural areas. There were some opportunities there. Since 2011, we were really looking for a composting opportunity in Detroit. And it wasn't until 2013 that we met John Bradburn and Detroit Dirt, as he showed in some of these examples. So that was another synergy opportunity for us. So in 2012, we continued that. We were really advancing the conversation, achieved 80% reduction that year, and 6 of our facilities went zero waste to landfill. Major accomplishment for those facilities. They did that by engaging in waste to energy for a very, very small stream. And we introduced composting in some of those regions, again, to be able to complete that. And with the team members, they really found champions at each facility. And so you're able to go in, and they did dumpster dives, which many of you have heard of. But we basically turn over a dumpster and weed through all the different items in there and talk about each one of them. And really that education level made a tremendous amount of difference into our facilities and how we treat different things. Again, different types of containers, collection areas that said compost, or we had different items. So it was really that education level. So as we transition into 2013, again, continuing to achieve those reduction goals, exceeding those, we had 10 sites landfill-free, and it was really increasing visibility, right? Creating a database with all of our records for recycling and reuse. We have some great examples of conveyor belts that were being turned into many different applications. There was just a lot of different items as far as the conveyor belts were going into an indoor track or paths for skaters in ice hockey rinks. So again, look at a conveyor belt and think of what it could possibly be at the end of its useful life as a conveyor belt. And again, the creation of an indoor track or paths for skaters is just something that, is just really transforms that piece of material. We did vendor tech programs. We looked to modify the size of our containers so people could put cardboard in. Just a lot of different areas where you really had an opportunity for that. And then as we move into 2014, even highlighting that further, we've achieved 17 landfill-free sites in the organization and had over a 90% reduction. The team members of the engagement as well as the team leadership was two of our individuals in our company that just did an amazing job going around to all of our different facilities and really assisting in that. And again, Detroit, I do want to point out in 2014 is one of the facilities, and we couldn't have done this without networking with the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development, as well as ROC Detroit. In September, when we launched this initiative, we were able to meet with Waste Management, we were able to meet with Detroit Dirt, and get those composting activities in Detroit Dirt, some waste to energy through Waste Management. And that's really a way that we're able to achieve these goals through these networking opportunities and through these partnerships and collaborations. So they're so important. Next. So to summarize, as we look at what can you take away and give back to your leadership or your organization groups. Really, it's leadership commitment at the top, and that's what we have through our Sustainable Development Summits that started in 2005 that incorporate at least 50% of the employees of the organization as well as over 100 external stakeholders. And so you have that leadership commitment, you have passionate team members, obviously, you could tell John is very passionate about the efforts that he's doing at General Motors and his team. Set aggressive goals, both short-term and long-term, and have a path of how you're going to get there. You may not meet each individual short-term goal, but you're going to be able to identify new opportunities. Really, education. So if you're looking to start this process, education is really important. We had many of our families, we have health fairs, and so their children and their whole families would come in, and we ended up seeing that the children were actually teaching the parents and the grandparents about recycling because that's something that they were doing in school at the time. So it's really engaging in that, engaging our stakeholders, identifying partnerships with your suppliers, customers, third-party vendors, being able to really look at the win-win for both. Measuring and tracking, again, is baseline requirement, and then really that dedication to some zero waste events. Our goal is to have a zero waste event at every year. And so we have, one year we actually had a party event at the Renaissance Center for General Motors because they were zero waste to landfill. We were able to meet that goal. Again, more collaborations, working with trade associations. I know we're working with the American Foundry Society. We're working with different trade associations to be able to get more engagement in those industries and really sharing best practices. And that's what I'd like to go to next. One of our facilities, if you can. Oh, really? So I wanted to compare this to John's 9-step process. And when you take a look at that, they really match quite nicely. And I just had pulled that out right before the meeting. And just so to show you a couple different ways, or a couple different terminologies of how we've classified, and it compares very nicely with the one that John showed, and really sharing those best practices. Next. So when you can see the success from 2011 to 2014, and obviously there was a lot of work prior to that, and then many facilities, it's just they're very close. Again, the 90% reduction for those that will be turning landfill free in 2015. So it's really how we can look at that, but it's also tracking any diversions or reduction levels in other areas as well. Next. This is a benchmarking that one of our facilities in Mexico, they did just within their facility last year. They worked and did a challenge for their employees to be able to come up with the items that were at their end of life and be able to use them for something different in the facility. So now we have a corporate-wide challenge that started on National Recycling Day and ends on Earth Day. And the objective of this challenge is to increase awareness and sensitivity around our local community. So each facility will have some sort of project that will be rated, and money will be donated to a charity of their choice based on the winning group or facility. Really, the projects should reflect how individuals can reduce waste in order to reduce pollution and save natural resources. And it all comes back to our natural resources and how we can, again, byproduct synergy, reuse whatever we have typically thought of materials, or identify new processes where it just extends that in circle and you're basically, reached the end of the useful life and it turns into a new life. And so this is a really nice way of benchmarking, and it's even something you could take that's very small if you don't have these goals. It's one way that you can engage your group into a small project in a very short period of time to really demonstrate all of the things that John has shown that he's taken out and engaged many individuals, but it's a pretty nice concise way of being able to do that. Next. Next. So this is an example of the ROC Detroit. There's some pictures of individuals there at our kickoff session that we had in September. And again, I was so fortunate to be able to make 2 connections during this meeting that we have continued to meet on and move forward. And this is really what's the start of something much larger, and we continue to grow. And I know many folks who were interested in this webinar today are on their road to zero waste to landfill. And so take advantage of all the folks that are in this picture and many more, and being able to complete your goals. If we have any questions, we can ask those now.
Great, thanks. Thank you for that, Dana. So again, if you have questions, there should be an option in the Google Hangout setup to type those in, so they get over to me. One question or one area I wanted to just touch on a little more and talk to you two about. So we've heard about the role of innovation and creativity you know, looking at these materials in kind of a new way. And you know, you both, you know, kind of work to take those steps within your company. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how and so get some specific examples of how that innovation and creativity has been leveraged with partners outside of your organization as well. So maybe John, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, some of the examples I gave, if not all of them, really entailed working outside of our organization with suppliers of ours and others who are not suppliers of ours. You know, I mentioned that, you know, we like reaching out and working projects that have many sustainability attributes, and based on that, you know, working for challenged in challenged neighborhoods or challenged individuals, those sort of things I think are important, and that's how you form relationships. Those relationships, many have been ongoing for many years and will continue. We feel honored to be able to do those sort of things. One company in itself has trouble and will have trouble doing things within a vacuum because, you know, we are a world community, and as such we need to work together. And that's why Dana gave some examples of, you know, how we at GM are working with Fairmount to tackle some of these very challenging issues. Sometimes when you combine different companies or different groups together, you'll come up with some solutions that are impossible to do alone.
Good. So just to kind of wrap this up then, since I haven't seen any additional questions come in through Google Hangouts. So as we mentioned, you know, throughout this presentation, John and Dana and a pretty significant group of other folks are here today through the U.S. Business Council, but more specifically through our ROC Detroit project. For more information on ROC Detroit, you can go to ROC Detroit, rocdetroit.org. And that'll talk a little bit about the initiative we're looking to get going. We kind of kicked off this project back in September last year. We had over 100 folks join us to share information about their materials and share and brainstorm some ideas on potential reuse solutions for those materials, and it was a great event. We are definitely looking forward to carrying that momentum through into 2015, applying some tools to organize that information and facilitate the transactions necessary to really close the loop on some of these things and push Detroit towards a culture of innovation around material reuse. So with that being said, thanks everyone for joining us today. This broadcast is being recorded and will be posted on the ROC Detroit website as well. So feel free to pass it around to any colleagues or other folks that you know that might be interested. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and we will be in touch with more in the future. Thanks, everyone.